The August sun beat down on Cancun as Lucas Schneider awoke. He opened his eyes and stared at a ceiling he didn't recognize. The room was small, the walls thin enough to hear the neighbors, a crying baby on one side, a television playing on the other. The smell of fried food and cigarette smoke hung heavy in the stuffy air. Lucas sat up on the worn-out couch and rubbed his face. His back ached from sleeping in an uncomfortable position, and his mouth felt dry as sandpaper. He was 30 years old, and his life had taken a turn he could never have imagined. 8 years ago, he had come to Mexico full of dreams and hopes. He wanted to work in the tourism industry, perhaps open his own diving business, or work as a tour guide on the Riviera Maya. The first few years had been promising. He had taught German to wealthy Mexican families, worked as a concierge in hotels, and earned enough to afford a small apartment in the Zona Hotelera. But then the pandemic hit. Tourism collapsed like a house of cards in the wind. Hotels laid off their staff en masse, language schools closed their doors, and the few jobs that remained were given to Mexicans with contacts and family connections. Lucas, the German foreigner with no network, suddenly found himself on the street. His savings melted away like ice in the Caribbean sun. Rent, food, the visa he had to renew to stay in the country legally. 4 months ago, he had lost his last job, a poorly paid position as a warehouse worker in a supermarket. His brother Felix, who had been living in Cancun for 10 years and had married a Mexican woman, had offered him the sofa. It was a temporary solution, Felix had said, just until Lucas got back on his feet, but both knew that temporary in their situation often turned into permanent. Felix worked as a driver for a rental car company and earned just enough to support his wife Maria and their 2 children. The apartment in Region 227, a working-class neighborhood far from the glitz of the tourist zone, was designed for 4 people. With Lucas, there were now 5 of them in 60 square meters. The tension was palpable, even if no one said it out loud. Lucas picked up his cell phone from the floor next to the couch. The screen showed several notifications. One was a reminder from the phone company, a final warning before disconnection. Another was a message from Felix. "Can you go shopping today? Maria needs milk and bread. The money is in the tin in the kitchen." Lucas sighed. He hated taking his brother's money, but he had no other choice. His last 300 pesos had gone a week ago on a meal and a bus ride to a job interview. A job he didn't get because the employer wanted someone with more local experience. Code for a Mexican. Then he saw the other message, the one that had been on his mind since last night. It came from a dating profile named Sophia M. The message was direct and to the point. "Hi, Lucas. I saw your profile and find you interesting. I'm in Cancun for a few days and looking for someone to show me around the city. I'd like to invite you to dinner. Are you free tonight?" Lucas had created the dating profile 3 months ago, not out of romantic interest, but out of sheer desperation. He had heard that some German and European female tourists were willing to pay for male companionship, discreetly, of course, packaged as a dinner date or city tour. It was a grey area that no one talked about openly, but it existed in Cancun like an open secret. The first few dates had been harmless, an older German woman who was divorced and looking for company. A dinner, a few cocktails, and at the end of the evening she had pressed 200 euros into his hand, with a smile and the words, "For your time." No further demands, no obligations. After that, others came. Some just wanted to talk, some were looking for more. Lucas had learned to read the signals, to understand the unspoken expectations. But this message from Sophia was different. She had no profile picture, just a blurry photo of a beach landscape. Her profile was sparse. No details about age, occupation, or interests. Only the city, Cancun, temporary. That should have made him suspicious, but the desperation of his situation left no room for skepticism. He replied, "Hello, Sophia. Yes, I'm free tonight. Where would you like to meet?" The reply came within minutes. "Perfect. I work as a waitress at the President Intercontinental Hotel. Tonight there's a private pool party for hotel guests. I have access for one guest. Would you like to come? The party starts at 8. We can meet at the bar beforehand." Lucas read the message twice. A pool party at the Presidente Intercontinental. That was one of the most exclusive hotels in the Zona Hotelera, a place he could never afford in his current situation. The thought of being part of that world for one evening was tempting, but there was also a voice in his head whispering, why would a waitress invite a stranger to a private party? He shook off the thought. Maybe she was just looking for company. Maybe she was new in town and didn't know anyone. Maybe she was lonely. People did strange things out of loneliness. Lucas had learned that over the past few months. He typed back, "That sounds great. What time shall we meet?" "At 7 at the hotel bar. I'll be wearing a black dress and a straw hat. I'll be easy to spot." Lucas confirmed and put his phone aside. Suddenly, the day didn't seem quite so bleak. He stood up, stretched his aching back, and went to the bathroom. The room was tiny, with a stained mirror and a shower whose water jet resembled more of a sad trickle. He looked at himself in the mirror. His face had become narrower in recent months, his cheekbones more prominent. He had lost weight, not for health reasons, but because he could often only afford one meal a day. Nevertheless, and he told himself this with a mixture of pride and resignation, he still looked good. His blue eyes, which he had inherited from his mother, stood out, even though there were dark circles underneath them. His blonde hair had grown longer because he couldn't afford a hairdresser, but that gave him a certain casual look. His body was still athletic, shaped by years of surfing and swimming, even if his ribs were now a little more visible. He showered with cold water. The water heater had been broken for days, and Felix didn't have the money to get it repaired. Then he shaved carefully, using the last drops of shaving cream he had bought weeks ago. Every movement was precise, deliberate. Tonight, he would be in another world, and he had to play the part. Lucas spent the rest of the day preparing. He ironed his only white shirt, which he had bought in a second-hand store in the city centre. The pants, black chinos, were a little worn at the knees, but no one would notice in the dark. He polished his shoes, brown leather shoes he had brought with him from Germany, until they were at least somewhat shiny. He left the apartment at 6 o'clock. Felix hadn't come home yet, and Maria was at her mother's with the children. Lucas was grateful for the silence. He took the bus to the Zona Hotelera, which cost 12 pesos. As the bus drove through the city, Lucas watched the landscape change. The poor neighborhoods with their corrugated iron roofs and dusty streets disappeared, replaced by wide, palm-lined avenues, luxurious hotels, and glittering shopping centers. It was like crossing two different countries. The Presidente Intercontinental stood majestically on Kukulkan Boulevard, overlooking the turquoise sea. Lucas got off the bus and stood there for a moment, impressed by the sheer opulence of the building. The lobby was open to the sea, with high ceilings and marble floors. Guests in expensive clothes strolled around, some with cocktails in their hands, others engrossed in conversation. Lucas entered the bar, which was located in a separate area of the lobby. The bar was elegantly furnished, with dark wood and subdued lighting. He ordered a mineral water, the cheapest item on the menu, and sat down at a bar table in the corner from where he could keep an eye on the entrance. At 7:15 p.m., he saw her. A woman in a black slim-fitting dress and a wide straw hat entered the bar. She was in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, with long dark hair and tanned skin. Her gait was confident but not intrusive. As she approached, Lucas noticed her eyes, dark brown, almost black, with an intense gaze that fixed on him. "Lucas?" she asked in a pleasant, deep voice. She spoke German with a slight accent that he couldn't immediately place. "Sophia," he replied, standing up. She smiled and held out her hand. Her handshake was firm, almost challenging. "Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming." "The pleasure is all mine," said Lucas, motioning for her to sit down. Sophia ordered a mojito and began to make small talk. She said she was originally from Colombia, but had been working in Mexico for years. She had only been in Cancun for a few weeks, working as a waitress in a hotel during the high season. The work was hard, she said, but the tips were good. Lucas told her about himself, a watered-down version of the truth. He was a German teacher, he said, and was currently working on various projects. He didn't mention the couch, the desperation, or the reminders. After about half an hour, Sophia said, "The party is about to start. Would you like to come?" She led him through a side entrance to the pool area. The party was already in full swing. A DJ was playing Latin American music mixed with international hits. The pool was lit up, the water shimmering in different shades of blue. People were everywhere, hotel guests in expensive casual clothes, some in the water, others at the bar or on the sun lounges. Sophia seemed to know everyone. She greeted the bartender with a smile, nodded to the security guard, and led Lucas to a quieter area at the edge of the pool area. There, she got 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter and handed one to Lucas. "Here's to a wonderful evening," she said, and clinked glasses with him. Lucas drank and felt the tension in his body slowly melt away. The champagne was cold and sparkling, and for a moment he could forget who he was and where he came from. Here, in this moment, he was just a man at a party, surrounded by luxury and ease. The hours flew by. Sophia was a good conversationalist, intelligent, funny, and with an infectious light-heartedness. She danced with him, laughed at his jokes, and occasionally touched his arm or shoulder, subtly but deliberately. Around midnight, the music slowed down and the crowd thinned out. Sophia suggested they go to the beach. She took off her shoes and led Lucas across the sand until they found a quiet spot, far enough away from the party, but close enough to still hear the music. They sat down on the sand, and Sophia leaned against Lucas. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said quietly. "I really had a wonderful time." "Me too," Lucas replied, and he meant it. For one evening he had felt like a human being again, not a failure sleeping on his brother's couch. Sophia turned to him and kissed him. It wasn't a tentative kiss, but passionate and demanding. Lucas returned the kiss, feeling her hands in his hair, her body close to his. What happened next blurred in Lucas's memory into a whirlwind of touches, whispers, and the sound of the waves. They went back to the hotel, Sophia leading him through a staff entrance to a room on the ground floor. It was small, simply furnished. A bed, a closet, a window overlooking an inner courtyard. Not the kind of room you would expect in a 5-star hotel. But Lucas asked no questions. The night was intense and passionate. Sophia was unlike any woman Lucas had ever been with, dominant, confident, almost aggressive in her lust. Sometime around dawn, Lucas fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When he awoke, the sun was already high in the sky. The room was empty. Sophia was gone, her things were gone. Only a note lay on the nightstand. Had to go to work early. Thanks for the wonderful night. S. Lucas sat up and rubbed his eyes. His body felt heavy, sluggish. And then he noticed it, a sharp pain in his abdomen that felt like a combination of burning and pulling. He ignored it at first, attributing it to his fatigue. But when he got up and went to the bathroom, the pain intensified. He looked down and froze. His skin was reddened, almost inflamed, and in some places it seemed strangely discolored, almost grayish. Panic rose within him. What was it? An allergic reaction? An infection? He quickly got dressed, left the hotel through the staff exit, and took the first bus back to Region 227. All day long, he tried to convince himself that it was nothing serious. Maybe a skin irritation. Maybe he had slept in an awkward position. But the pain grew stronger, throbbing and relentless, and the discoloration spread, dark and ominous. In the evening, when Felix came home and found Lucas curled up on the couch, his face contorted with pain, Felix knew immediately that something was wrong. "Lucas, what's wrong?" he asked, alarmed. Lucas couldn't answer. He could only point to his abdomen, unable to find the words. Felix didn't hesitate. He called a taxi and took Lucas to the nearest public hospital. During the ride, Lucas stared out the window, watching the city lights pass by, wondering what the hell had happened that night. He had no idea that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would change his life forever. The Hospital General de Cancun was crowded. People sat on plastic chairs in the hallways, some sleeping, others staring blankly ahead. The smell of disinfectant mingled with sweat and fear. Felix led Lucas through the emergency room, past crying children and coughing elderly people. A nurse, tired and overworked, glanced at Lucas and motioned for them to sit down. "It may take a while," she said in Spanish. "We have 3 traffic accidents tonight." Lucas sat slumped in a chair, his arms wrapped around his stomach. The pain had intensified, becoming a constant throbbing burn that could not be ignored. The discoloration had spread further, dark, greyish spots that looked like bruises but felt different. The skin was warm, almost hot, and when he touched it, it felt strangely soft, as if the tissue underneath was giving way. Felix sat next to him, cell phone in hand, texting his wife Maria to let her know where they were. He avoided looking directly at Lucas. The silence between them was tense. "What happened?" Felix finally asked quietly. Lucas swallowed. I met someone. A woman. We spent the night together." Felix nodded slowly, without judgment. "And then, when I woke up, she was gone. And this," Lucas pointed vaguely to his groin, "this started. Do you have her name, phone number?" Lucas shook his head. "Just her profile on the dating app. Sophia. She said she works as a waitress at the President Intercontinental." Felix took out his cell phone. "I'll call there." While Felix was on the phone, Lucas watched the other patients. A young man with his arm in a sling, an elderly woman praying quietly to herself, a child crying, holding his mother's hand. Everyone here had their own story, their own suffering. Felix came back, his face tense. "They don't have a waitress named Sophia, and there was no pool party for guests last night." Lucas felt his stomach tighten. "That can't be. I was there. I saw the party, the people. Are you sure it was the Presidente?" Lucas wanted to argue, but then he hesitated. Was he sure? The night had been a blur of alcohol, music, and lust. Had he really paid attention to the details? He remembered the bar, the pool, the people. But had it really been the President? Before he could answer, a nurse called his name. "Schneider, Lucas." Felix helped him up, and they followed the nurse into a small examination room. A doctor arrived shortly after, Dr. Morales, according to the name tag on his chest. He was in his mid-40s, with grey temples and deep wrinkles around his eyes. "What brings you to us?" he asked in Spanish as he took notes. Lucas replied in broken Spanish, explaining the symptoms. Dr. Morales listened, his face expressionless. Then he asked Lucas to undress. What the doctor saw made him pause. His eyes widened slightly, and he called for a second opinion. A younger doctor came in, Dr. Ramirez, and the two of them examined Lucas in silence. "When did the symptoms start?" Dr. Morales finally asked. "This morning, around 9 o'clock. The doctors exchanged glances. "And you had sexual intercourse last night?" Lucas nodded, shame burning on his face. Dr. Ramirez wrote something down. "We need to run some tests. Blood tests, tissue samples, urine tests. This..." She hesitated. "This looks like a necrotizing infection, but the speed is unusual." Necrotizing, Felix repeated, alarmed. Tissue death, Dr. Morales explained, usually caused by bacterial infections. But if this started last night and is already so advanced, he shook his head, we have to admit you, immediately. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Lucas was taken to a room, hooked up to an IV, and given broad-spectrum antibiotics. Doctors came and went, ran tests, asked questions. Felix stayed the whole time, sitting on a chair next to the bed and scrolling through his phone. I found her profile, Felix said suddenly. He showed Lucas the display. Sophia M. His profile had disappeared, deleted. She's gone, Lucas whispered, or she was never real, Felix murmured. Around midnight, Dr. Morales returned, this time with an older man in tow. This is Dr. Garcia, our chief infectious disease specialist. I asked him to take a look at your case. Dr. Garcia was a man in his 60s, with white hair and reading glasses balanced on his nose. He examined Lucas thoroughly, read the test results, and frowned. The antibiotics aren't working, he finally said. The necrosis is spreading. We haven't found any bacteria in the blood, no viruses, no known pathogens. He paused. Have you visited any exotic places lately? Jungles? Caves? Lucas shook his head. Taken any drugs? Unknown substances? No. Dr. Garcia sighed. Then we have something here that is beyond our experience. I recommend that we surgically remove the tissue before it spreads further. But I have to be honest. I've never seen anything like this before. Felix stood up. What does that mean? It means that your brother is very sick, and we don't know why. That night, Lucas lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the hospital room and wondering who Sophia really was and what she had done to him. On his third day in the hospital, Lucas could no longer get up. The necrosis had spread across his entire lower abdomen, creeping across his skin like black tentacles. The tissue felt dead, cold, and lifeless, while the rest of his body burned with fever. The pain had become unbearable, and even strong doses of morphine brought only brief relief. Dr. Garcia had assembled a team of specialists, infectious disease specialists, toxicologists, even a tropical medicine specialist from Mexico City had been flown in. They stood around Lucas's bed like vultures, discussing in Spanish, pointing to X-rays and lab results. No one had any answers. The cell structure is simply collapsing, explained Dr. Ramirez Felix, who hadn't gone home for 3 days. It's as if something is decomposing the tissue from the inside out, but we can't find any pathogens, no toxins, nothing. What about the woman? Felix asked desperately. Sophia? The police are looking for her, replied Dr. Garcia, who had overheard the conversation. I've reported the case to the health authorities. If she's carrying an unknown disease... He left the sentence unfinished. That afternoon, Detective Carmen Ruiz came to the hospital for the first time. She was a woman in her mid-40s with short black hair and tired eyes that looked as if they had seen too much. She sat down next to Lucas's bed and took out a notebook. Mr. Schneider, I'm Detective Ruiz from the Cancun Criminal Investigation Department. Can you talk to me? Lucas nodded weakly. His voice was hoarse, and he had difficulty speaking. Tell me about the woman, about Sophia. Lucas repeated the story, the dating profile, the invitation, the party, the night. Carmen listened without interrupting, taking notes. Describe her, she finally said. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Long dark hair, brown eyes, Latin American, maybe Colombian. She spoke German with an accent. Carmen took a photo out of her bag and placed it on the bedspread in front of Lucas. Is this her? Lucas stared at the photo. It showed a woman who looked like Sophia, but not identical. Younger, perhaps, or older. It was hard to tell. I'm not sure. Mut, "This is the third victim in 5 years," Carmen said quietly, "all with the same symptoms, all after a night with a woman who disappeared afterward." Lucas felt his heart pounding in his chest. "The others, are they still alive?" Carmen shook her head. "The first died after 4 days, the second after 6. The third—" She hesitated. "He died yesterday, in a hospital in Playa del Carmen. Same symptoms, no explanation." The words hit Lucas like a blow. He was going to die. This wasn't a disease that could be cured. It was an execution. "Who is she?" he whispered. "That's what we're trying to find out," Carmen replied. "But she's like a ghost, different names, different faces. She always disappears without a trace." Felix, who had been standing quietly in the corner the whole time, stepped forward. "You have to find her. She can't just keep going." Carmen looked at him, and in her eyes was a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "We're trying, but she's smart. She leaves nothing behind." After Carmen's visit, Lucas fell into a kind of trance. Reality blurred with fever-induced hallucinations. He saw Sophia in his dreams, but her face kept changing, sometimes young, sometimes old, sometimes beautiful, sometimes disfigured. She spoke to him in a language he didn't understand, her voice like the sound of the sea. In a moment of clarity late at night, he woke up and saw a figure at the foot of his bed. At first, he thought it was a nurse, but then he recognized the silhouette, slender, with long hair. "Sophia," he whispered. The figure did not move. In the dim light of the surveillance monitors, he could not see her face, only the contours of her body. "Why?" Lucas managed to say. "Why me?" The figure tilted her head as if thinking. Then, in a voice that sounded both near and far, she said, "You were available." Lucas wanted to scream, to call for help, but his voice failed him. When he blinked, the figure was gone. Had it even been there, or was it just another hallucination? In the morning, he told Dr. Garcia about it. The doctor frowned and increased his medication dose. "Fever dreams," he explained. "Completely normal at your temperature." But Felix, who had stayed awake all night, had also seen something. A woman walking down the hallway, slowly, almost floating. He had wanted to follow her, but then she turned a corner and disappeared. "I don't think it was a dream," Felix said quietly to Lucas when they were alone. "I think she was here." Detective Carmen returned, this time with a colleague, Detective Moreno, a young man with glasses. They had new information. "We checked the surveillance cameras at the President Intercontinental," Carmen said. "You were filmed entering the lobby at 7:47 p.m. that evening." "But—" She paused. "You were alone." Lucas shook his head. "That can't be. She was with me. The cameras show you going to the bar, sitting down, having a drink. Then you go to the pool, alone. You seem to be talking to someone, but there's no one in the footage." "That's crazy," Felix muttered. "It gets even stranger," Moreno added. "We spoke to the bartender. He remembers you, but not a woman. None of the staff remember her." Lucas felt the world around him collapse. Either he had gone mad, or something was going on here that was beyond all logic. "The other victims," said Carmen, pulling a folder out of her bag. "They all reported similar experiences, encounters with women no one else saw, hotel rooms that don't exist, parties that never happened." She laid photos on the bed. 3 men, all young, all dead. Their faces were contorted in death, their skin gray and sunken. "We don't believe we're dealing with a normal criminal here," Carmen said, "but with something else." Until Lucas wanted to laugh, but only a dry rattle came out of his throat. "Something else. What does that mean?" Carmen looked him straight in the eye. "There are stories in Mexican folklore about creatures that feed on life energy. The ancients called them chihuateteo, ghosts of dead women who hunt young men at night. You're talking about superstition, Felix said incredulously. I'm talking about something that killed 4 men without leaving a trace, Carmen replied. Call it what you want. That evening, as the sun set over the Caribbean Sea and the shadows grew longer, Lucas lay in his bed and accepted the truth. He was going to die. Not from an illness, but from something that medicine couldn't explain and the police couldn't catch. And somewhere out there, in the glittering hotels and noisy bars of Cancun, Sophia was already looking for her next victim. On the 5th day, Lucas stopped fighting. The doctors had performed 3 surgical procedures, removed necrotic tissue, tried experimental drugs. Nothing helped. The decomposition progressed inexorably, eating through his body like invisible fire. His brother Felix sat by the bed, his eyes red from crying. Maria had come, placed her hand on Lucas's shoulder and prayed quietly. Even the children had been there, staring through the glass door of the isolation room, too young to understand that their uncle Lucas was going to die. Dr. Garcia arrived in the afternoon with a new doctor, Dr. Elena Voss, a German pathologist who specialized in rare diseases. She had heard about Lucas's case and had flown in from Hamburg. Herr Schneider, she said in German, and Lucas was so grateful to hear his mother tongue that tears came to his eyes. I've studied your records. What's happening to you is medically impossible, and yet it's happening. She pulled up a chair and sat down next to him. I spoke to Detective Ruiz about the other cases, about the theories. They think I'm crazy, Lucas whispered. No, Dr. Voss said firmly. I think we're dealing with something that Western medicine can't explain. I spent 3 years in Brazil, working with shamans, with traditional healers. I saw things there, she paused, things that my training considers impossible. She opened a folder and showed Lucas some photos. In various cultures, there are reports of beings that feed on life energy. In Brazil, they are called encantados. In Romania, moroi. In Japan, kitsune. She laid down another photo. And here in Mexico, chihuateteo, ghosts of women who died in childbirth. They wander at night looking for young men. Those are fairy tales, Felix said from across the room. Dr. Voss looked at him. Fairy tales are often based on truth. And when 4 men die of identical symptoms with no medical explanation, after they've all met a woman that no one else has seen. She left the sentence unfinished. What can I do? Lucas asked. His voice was little more than a whisper. Survive, Dr. Voss replied simply. Break the cycle. The other victims gave up. Maybe that's part of the process, the resignation, the hopelessness. She feeds on that. Detective Carmen returned in the evening, this time with news. We have a lead, she said. A waitress at Club Palazzo remembers a woman who was there 2 weeks ago. The description fits. She was flirting with a young tourist. Is he still alive? Felix asked. Carmen nodded. We found him. Marco Delgado, 26, from Playa del Carmen. He was supposed to meet her yesterday, but he didn't show up. He had a bad feeling and cancelled. He was lucky, Lucas muttered. We've put him under protection, Carmen continued, and we've left his dating profile active as bait. If she makes contact again, then you catch her, Felix finished. Carmen hesitated. Theoretically, yes. But Mr. Schneider, I have to be honest. I don't know what we would do if we found her. Arrest her for what? The evidence is difficult. That night, when everyone had left and only the machines sang their rhythmic song, she came back. This time, Lucas was sure it was not a hallucination. Sophia stood at the window, looking out at the illuminated city. In the moonlight, she looked different, older or timeless. There was something rigid, mask-like about her face. You're dying, she said without turning around. Thanks to you, Lucas replied. She turned around, and for the first time he really saw her eyes. They were black, completely black, without any white. You chose, on the app, in the bar, on the beach. You could have left at any time. You deceived me. I showed you what you wanted to see, said Sophia. A way out. A night without worries. That is my gift. Your gift is death. She smiled, and it was a sad smile. Death comes to everyone. I'm just speeding up the inevitable, and in return, I take a little. A little, Lucas laughed bitterly. You take everything. Life is energy, Sophia said. I exist between worlds, neither dead nor alive. To stay, I have to feed. She moved closer to the bed. You're not the first. You won't be the last. The police are looking for you. The police are blind to what I am. She leaned over him, and he could feel her breath on his face, cold as winter air. But you see me. Really, that makes you special. Then let me live, whispered Lucas. Please. Sophia straightened up. I can't. The process has begun. But I can give you something else. The truth. She stepped back to the window. There are others like me. Not many, but enough. We wander the world searching for those who are willing to give, even if they don't know it. Willing? Lucas asked incredulously. You were desperate enough to sell yourself. In that moment of weakness, when the soul is vulnerable, we can penetrate. She looked at him. Your brother, for example, he would never be vulnerable, too strongly anchored in his family, his love. But you, she tilted her head. You had nothing left to lose. The words hit Lucas harder than the pain, because they were true. He had given up long before he met Sophia. When I die, he said with difficulty, you will continue. Kill others. Yes. And no one can stop you. Sophia was silent for a moment. There was someone once, a long time ago, a priest in a village. He knew the old rituals, but those days are gone. People have forgotten. What was the ritual? She smiled again, this time amused. That wouldn't do you any good now. You've already gone too far. When the morning sun fell through the blinds, she was gone. But Lucas understood. There was a way to stop her, and even if he himself would not survive, he might be able to help others. When Detective Carmen arrived the next morning, Lucas told her everything, every word, every detail. She listened, took notes, didn't question him. A ritual, she repeated. We need to find someone who knows the old ways. Quickly, Lucas said. His voice was growing weaker. I don't have much time left. Carmen nodded and reached for her cell phone. I know someone, a curandera in Valladolid. If anyone can help, it's her. While Carmen was on the phone, Lucas closed his eyes. The pain was now a constant companion, but underneath it was something else, a strange calm. He had found a purpose. Even in death, he could still make a difference. The only question was, would there be enough time? The curandera arrived on the evening of the 6th day. Her name was Ixchel, a small woman with white hair and hands scarred from decades of working with medicinal herbs and rituals. She wore an embroidered huipil blouse and smelled of copal smoke and wild sage. Dr. Garcia didn't want to let her into the hospital. This is not a medical facility for superstition, he protested. Carmen had shown her badge. This is part of a murder investigation. She's coming in. Ixchel sat down next to Lucas's bed and stared at him for a long time. Her eyes were dark and deep, as if they could see right through him. She didn't speak German, only Spanish and Maya, so Carmen translated. She says you carry death within you, Carmen translated. But not your own death. A stolen one. Ixchel touched Lucas's forehead, then his heart. She murmured something in Maya, then pulled a bundle of dried herbs, a seashell, and a small bottle of dark liquid from her bag. What is she doing? Felix asked nervously. Olympia ritual, Carmen explained. An energetic cleansing. She's trying to break the connection between Lucas and the creature. Ixchel began to sing, an ancient throaty chant, in a language that sounded older than time itself. She lit the herbs and waved the smoke over Lucas's body. The machines in the room flickered briefly, and the temperature seemed to drop. Suddenly, Ixchel opened her eyes wide and shouted something in Maya. She fell back as if she had bumped into something. Carmen and Felix rushed to her. "What happened?" Felix cried. Ixchel spoke quickly, her voice trembling. Carmen translated, "She says the creature is strong, very old. It has already anchored itself too deeply in Lucas. The ritual alone is not enough." "What do we need?" Carmen asked urgently. Ixchel looked at her, then at Lucas. She spoke again, more slowly this time. "She says there is only one way," Carmen translated in a low voice. "The creature must let go voluntarily, or it must be destroyed while it is feeding, at the moment when it is vulnerable." "How?" Lucas asked weakly. Ixchel pulled a small obsidian black knife from her bag. She spoke directly to Lucas, and Carmen translated, "When she comes back, and she will, you must give her this. Into the heart. Obsidian is sacred. It can sever what exists between worlds." "She wants me to kill her," Lucas whispered. "Or die," said Ixchel in Spanish, words that Lucas understood. She placed the knife on his bed and stood up. Before she left, she placed her hand on Lucas's head and said a blessing. Then she left the room as quietly as she had come. Felix picked up the knife. "This is crazy. You can't fight in your condition." "I have to try," said Lucas, "for Marco, for the others who are yet to come." Carmen nodded. "I'll stay here. When she comes, we'll be ready." Night crept in like a living thing. At midnight, the lights dimmed. Carmen sat alertly on a chair, her hand on her weapon. Felix had gone home to Maria, exhausted and full of worry. And then she was there. Sophia stood at the window as before, but this time her face was different, hungrier, more desperate. "You'll die faster than the others," she said. "I have to hasten the end." Lucas reached for the knife under his blanket. "Come closer." Sophia smiled. "You think a piece of stone can stop me?" "Obsidian," said Carmen, who had stood up. "Sacred stone of the Maya." Sophia looked at Carmen, and for the first time uncertainty showed in her eyes. "The old woman was here, and she told us how to stop you," said Lucas. Sophia moved with lightning speed. She was suddenly next to the bed, her hand around Lucas's neck. "Then, die now." But Lucas was ready. With his last ounce of strength, he thrust the obsidian knife upward, straight into Sophia's chest. She screamed, a sound that was not human, that pierced through and through. Black smoke poured from the wound, and her body began to dissolve, becoming transparent. "This isn't over," she hissed. "There are others, like me." Then she was gone, just vanished. Only the knife lay on the floor, covered with something that looked like ash. Carmen ran to the bed. "Lucas, are you alive?" Lucas was breathing heavily. "I think so." In the hours that followed, something incredible happened. The necrosis stopped. The black spots became lighter. Dr. Garcia couldn't explain it, but the tests showed that Lucas' body was beginning to heal. "A medical miracle," murmured Dr. Voss. Carmen knew better. She took the obsidian knife and put it in an evidence bag. For next time. Because everyone knew, Sophia was right. There were others like her. Somewhere, in other cities, other countries, they were waiting for their next victims. 3 months later, Lucas stood on the beach in Cancun and looked out at the turquoise water. The scars on his body had faded, but they hadn't disappeared. They would forever remind him of how close he had come to death. He was now working with Detective Carmen, an unofficial collaboration, as she called it. They had created a database of reports on similar cases from all over Latin America, Playa del Carmen, Tulum, even cases from Colombia and Brazil. The pattern was always the same: young men, mysterious women, unexplained deaths. Marco Delgado had survived because he had cancelled. Now he was also helping with the research. Together, they tried to warn others, even though no one wanted to believe them. Felix had helped Lucas find a small apartment. Nothing luxurious, but his own space. The relationship between the brothers had grown stronger through the crisis. Maria cooked for him every Sunday, and the children called him Uncle Survivor. Dr. Voss had returned to Hamburg, but they stayed in touch. She collected reports of similar phenomena from around the world, trying to connect science with the inexplicable. The obsidian knife was now in Carmen's safe, wrapped in white cloth. For emergencies, she had said. Lucas's cell phone vibrated. A message from Carmen. New case, Puerto Vallarta, 24-year-old tourist, same symptoms, will be there in 2 hours. Lucas sighed. He had known this day would come. Sophia had told the truth. There were others like her. Maybe it would never end. But he had also learned that despair makes you vulnerable. Hopelessness opens doors that should remain closed. These beings fed not only on life, but on resignation. He typed back, "I'm ready." As he walked to the bus, he saw a woman standing on the beach, long dark hair, black dress, too elegant for an afternoon at the beach. She looked at him, and for a moment their eyes met. Then she smiled and disappeared into the crowd. Lucas quickened his pace. The hunt continued. But this time, he was the hunter, not the prey. Somewhere in Cancun, in the glittering hotels and dark alleys, the creatures were waiting. But now there were people who knew what to look for, people who were ready to fight. Night would come, as it always did. But Lucas Schneider had learned that even in the darkest night, a spark of hope could save lives. And sometimes that was enough.